guys from drinks, so I'm going to try to make this as much fun as possible. So stay with me. I'm here to talk about today. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Nidhi Gupta. I'm the SVP of Technology at Hired. How many people in the room are familiar with Hired? All right, great. So it's always great to be here because you guys know about Hired. So Hired, as you may know, we're a marketplace that connects top tech talent with the world's most innovative companies. The way the platform works is a candidate creates their profile on the platform. In conjunction with creating their profile, they also state how much they want to earn. When a company tries to reach out to a candidate, they reach out to the candidate knowing fully well how much that candidate is expecting by way of wages. This level of wage awareness and transparency does not exist in our industry today. By virtue of creating this transparency and by virtue of the fact that Hired manages the entire process, right from a candidate creating their profile all the way to them getting hired, we get unique visibility into a candidate's aspirations, their desires, and their expectations. It also allows us to study the data from the perspective of wage inequities and inequalities that are so rampant in our industry today. So today, as part of my talk, I will share with you some of that data. We recently published our third annual State of Wage Inequalities report, so I'll share some of those findings with you. So before I get started, the topic of my talk is this moving? Oh. How to build and retain diverse teams. And since this is before drinks, we'll do some real talk. A little bit about myself. I'm an engineer. I should actually say I was an engineer, and then I became a manager. Now I've been a manager for over 18 years. And through the course of my career, I must have hired over 300 engineers. I would love to stand here in front of you and say, especially in light of this topic, that I've hired 150 of them have been underrepresented candidates. Not the case. But I've tried. And that's what we're here to talk about. As I've tried, I've had successes, I've had failures. I've made a lot of mistakes. And what I want to share with you is some of those tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. So let's go through a story. You walk into the office one day, and you look around the office, and you see a lot of very similar people. It reeks of homogeneity. So you decide that you want to build a diverse team. That's great. That's awesome. That's step one. Your first instinct is, let me go talk to my recruiter. So you go talk to your recruiter. You and your recruiter align. And next, the recruiter, bless her heart, she starts spamming diverse candidates on LinkedIn. Works to some extent, but okay. You're passionate about this, so you decide to pitch in too, so you start spamming candidates as well. You're laughing, so I'm sure you've gone through this, right? But whoa, magic, somebody's interested. Jackpot, she's a woman. Double treat, she's from India, intersectional diversity, your first diverse hire in intersectional diversity. It's amazing, right? So you're so invested in this, you really want to move forward. You do a quick TPS, and then you want to bring her in. She comes into the office for her on-site. Here's what happens. All the interviews are male, so that's okay. You know, you're trying to, this is your first step, that's okay. You guys ask her to code on the whiteboard. All right, a little bit uncomfortable, but okay. Two of the interviewers, so you're like doing a panel, two of the interviewers don't like to make eye contact. She's a woman, it's kind of uncomfortable. You don't see that many in the tech industry. Oh, and by the way, they're bantering amongst each other, but not her, but she's the one that you're evaluating. And then she's asked to code a game of Battleship. And for my hired engineers here, they'll appreciate the story. Let's see. You like her, kind of. This is a very competitive industry. You have to take her out for drinks to sell her. So you guys go out in the evening, you go for drinks. The next day, at debrief, the feedback is kind of mixed. She took a long time for that code of battle, for that game of battleship. It took a long time for her to understand what this game was. You haven't seen that with other candidates. And you know what? When you were out at drinks, she just didn't seem that much fun. She didn't seem very comfortable. So you have concerns from a culture fit standpoint. Sounding familiar so far? With me? All right, thank you, thank you. All right, you're committed. You really have hopes here, and your gut tells you there's something here. So, next day, you decide that you want to move forward. You extend her an offer. She's a bit hesitant, but you're committed. You want her to, you get on a sell call with the CEO is able to sell her into the job, she joins, great. You got your first diverse hire. 3 months in, she's miserable, you're miserable, your team's miserable. She hardly has any overlap with your team. Most of your engineers come in at 11, they leave at 8, she comes in at 9, she leaves at 5. You're like, there's just no overlap with her. Engineers like to hang out and go out in the evenings. She ends up leaving at 5, she doesn't enjoy that. She's just not assimilating with the team. You think that she's not delivering and she's not a good culture fit. 3 months later, she leaves. You heave a huge sigh of relief, oof, and attribute that to a mishire. Done. Has it happened to anybody here? It's happened to me. Flavors of this and many, many, many other flavors of this, these happen to women like me every single day in our industry today. So let's look at what was wrong in this whole story. First, she's from India, I'm from India, I grew up in India. I did not grow up knowing the game of battleship. I do not know how to play a game of battleship. So if you're going to give me an hour worth of exercise and 10 minutes of it is going to be me grokking the game of battleship, I'm automatically at a disadvantage. Next, she doesn't drink. Actually, that's not true. I do drink. But this candidate doesn't drink. And you took her for drinks. And oh, by the way, the reason why she was so uncomfortable is because she had a baby to go back home to. But you didn't ask her that, and you didn't check if that would be okay. And the list goes on and on and on. It's not because you're consciously doing this. It's just because you just don't know, and we as humans often do not check. It's great. You have a great start that you at least want to start with a diverse team. That's phenomenal. But if you're going to invest the time and effort, then set yourself up for success. Start with the basics. If you have a leaky funnel, no matter how much sourcing you do up top, if people keep leaving, then there's no point to this exercise because you're not going to achieve your goal. So how do you build a diverse team? It's the entire funnel. It's a clear, crisp role definition. It's sourcing. It's the interview process. It's salary and offer management. And last but not the least, and the most important bit, is retention. So my advice in doing this, because I used to start at the sourcing step as well, my advice in doing this is start at retention. Don't start at sourcing. Make sure that first plug the leaky funnel, and make sure that if you're lucky enough to attract one of us in your company, we'll stay there and we'll love it. So let's talk about retention. What does that mean? An effective DE&I strategy should have three steps to it: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let me explain what each of these are. Diversity means inviting everybody to the party. Equity means ensuring that you have enough fun events at the party so that everybody you've invited can have fun. And inclusion is ensuring that people are able to have fun. So if you need an elevator access or a ramp, you ensure that, and that would be inclusion. In our setup, DE&I strategy would be things like ensuring that your fun events are not all about drinking. Your fun events are 4 to 5 as opposed to 5 to 6. Your work culture is such that engineers don't come in at 11 and leave at 8 because people like me who have kids need to go home to our families. So those are very, very simple things you can do starting tomorrow in your respective offices if that's not what your environment is. Last year, according to Kapoor Institute, 40% of tech workers left their previous jobs because they felt that there was unfair treatment for them. So this is not just a retention, this retention exercise that you're going to go through, it's not just for diverse candidates, it's for all candidates. Lastly, if you have a good HR and ops team, people ops team, work with them. Set up a great comp philosophy. Set up a ERG so that employees have chances to hang out with each other and talk to each other. And these are support groups that are very, very important in our culture today. Let's move on from retention to salary. Our data shows that 69% of the time women ask for less. 69% of the time. So if you hire a woman today, you're getting an automatic discount. If you keep that discount, shame on you. Because, and here's why it's important, women are asking for less 69% of the time. So there's a very high degree of likelihood if you hire a woman, she's going to get paid less. Recruiters often use salary as a calibration for seniority. Every single conversation you have with a recruiter, every single conversation I have with a recruiter, the first question they will ask is, Nidhi, how much are you making? It's illegal now, so I'm sure in the future they will say, how much are you expecting? And they're very open about that it's about them calibrating. One of the most requested features on Hired is a salary range, is filtering by salary, because that's how they calibrate how senior a candidate is. So women are asking for less. If you pay them less, then they will always get calibrated for the not so senior roles, which is totally unfair, right? The second reason why this is important is if you continue to pay women less, then you're continuing to perpetuate the bias and the inequity that exists in the industry today. We want to change this. We don't want to continue this. A few other data points from a salary standpoint. Our data found that for the same role at the same company, this is exact same role at the exact same company, women are paid 63% of the time less than their male counterparts. The average wage gap is 4%, and sometimes this wage gap could be as high as 45%. This is not data across all engineers. This is same role, same company, same senior software engineer with the same skills, same years of experience at the same company. How that intersects with age is even more astounding. So women start off their careers great. So the black bars here are women's expectations, and red bars there are about the actual wage gap. They start their careers strong, both from an expectation standpoint and from an actual wage standpoint. But look at what happens in mid-30s. In the age bracket of 36 to 40, we think we've arrived. We think we should be able to command more, so we ask for more. The expectation gap in that age range is so close, it's so small. But boom, we don't get what we thought we wanted. We don't get what we thought we deserved. And then the expectation gap never closes. There are other factors here that I'm sure are at play, such as this is the age when women are growing their families and they're focusing on their families, and it's very hard for them to re-enter the workforce. Again, going back to retention, you want to make sure that you have good parental leave policies. You want to make sure that you have great programs in place to allow and facilitate women re-entering the workforce and coming back from these extended leaves. All right, let's move on. Interview process. In the example that I showed to you, there were lots of things wrong with that interview process. Fundamentally, I don't believe that we are biased. All of our bias is unconscious bias, or at least most of it. So let's try to tackle that. And the way we tackle that is by training, because we need somebody to hold that mirror in front of our eyes and tell us and inform us of our unconscious biases. So have everybody, all your hiring managers, your entire interview team, go through unconscious bias training. It's tremendously important. Even me, a diverse candidate, I have my own sets of unconscious biases that these trainings have really helped me see and overcome. You need to structure your interview process as much as possible. So going back to the role definition, it starts there. Have a very crisp, clear definition of who you're looking for. Have a very clear rubric for evaluation. Assign competencies, I'm sure most of us do. But after you assign competencies, make sure there's a very clear rubric in terms of how you're going to measure and evaluate a candidate, and be consistent in your approach. Be consistent from one candidate to the other. Formulate and run very tight debriefs where I feel does not come into play. It's all about the rubric that you've created. And from a culture fit standpoint, focus on culture add. At Hired, we do values fit, because we want to make sure whoever we're bringing in is not necessarily a great person to hang out with and have drinks with, but they actually assimilate and imbibe the 5 core values of our company. That is what will make a successful team and a successful company, as opposed to somebody you can go out and have fun with. That's important, but not critical. Sourcing. So finally, when you get to sourcing, if you continue to look in the same small pool of candidates who had great Ivy League school education, who have CS degrees, who had the good fortune of entering a great company like a Google, Netflix, or what have you, you'll continue to tap into the same small pool. You need to diversify. There are many of us who were not fortunate enough to get there, but that doesn't mean that we're not good enough. Evaluate candidates on their skills, so diversify your outreach. Do not just focus on very, very specific niche skills. If you see somebody who's 90% there from a skill standpoint and just one particular term is missing, entertain that candidate. You will be surprised. Look beyond the 25-mile radius, because not all of us are lucky enough or fortunate enough to be able to live in San Francisco, which is such an expensive area to live in. So diversify from a sourcing standpoint, and be willing to give candidates a chance, even if their resumes don't speak as powerful as an MIT graduate's resumes could be. Why are we talking about all of this? Why should you care? One, you had that goal, right? But second, why is this important to us in today's day and age? Based on our data, 54% of the women, over half the women today in our industry know that they are underpaid. That's over half the women who know that they're underpaid. And 75% of your employees today say that they would not want to work at your company should it receive any negative attention because of wage disparity. This is 75% of all employees, not just women, not just diverse candidates. So if retention is a concern to you, not just from a diverse candidate standpoint, but as a team standpoint, then that's why you should care. Lastly, this is 2018, right? If Elon Musk and NASA have their way, we'd be traveling to Mars in 2030. The rate at which this wage gap is closing, it'll be year 2152 by the time it closes. That's not a typo. It's 2152, not 2052. That's 134 years from now. It's crazy. Can you imagine 134 years from now, everybody's still talking about wage gap? That's madness. This is not somebody else's problem to solve. This is our problem to solve. This is our collective industry. And if all of us band together, we can make a change. We can change the trajectory. We can make this happen way, way, way faster than 2152. I would hate to be talking about this when I'm 80, 90 years old. Trust me. Thank you.
Thank you. Nidhi, we're going to take a couple of questions, just really quick. One of the questions comes from Henry, and it's about inclusion. How do you foster an environment within the organization, or what can I do as a manager, where people from different backgrounds felt value when they share their ideas?
That's a great question. A few tips. Just ask, right? What I found in my career, and I didn't used to do this, just ask. If you're planning a fun event, ask your team where they would like to go. But because you want to be inclusive and because you have a diverse team, make sure that majority doesn't always rule. Because if majority rules, then you will not be able to factor in counter viewpoints. And after asking, so let's say you want to go out for drinks, by default, make sure you're going out from 4 to 5. That should just be the rule of thumb. There's no reason for you to keep everybody late and putting somebody at a disadvantage or having this uncomfortable conversation. I had a candidate who was going to come in for an interview, and it actually happened to be a male candidate. And he said, Nidhi, I'm just not comfortable coding during my interview. I'm like, okay, I can make reasonable accommodation there. I can give you an exercise, it's honor system. You code it at home, you tell me how much time you took, and you send it in. We'll evaluate your code based on that. So make reasonable accommodations. First ask, and after asking, make reasonable accommodations wherever you can.
Next question. In an environment where a lot of companies are evaluating candidates for cultural fit, i.e. beliefs that are very similar to ours, how do you avoid disqualifying people with different backgrounds and beliefs?
Great question. I think it goes back to values fit of the company, not you as an individual, right? So at Hired, one of our core values is act like an owner. The kinds of questions we ask candidates are about, did you act like an owner in your previous career, Another value is take intelligent risks. So the questions we ask during the values fit interview are questions around, tell me a time in your career where you've taken a risk and how did that pan out? So tie your interview questions not to you as an individual hiring manager, not to you as a single team, but to you as a company. And you want to aspire for candidates who actually match the values of your company.
All right, last question. How do you change the company's belief to think more about diversity by showing the ROI?
I get asked this all the time, flavors of this. How do I convince my executive team to focus more on diversity? At the end of the day, for me, it all ties back to values. If you have a conversation with your executive team or your company and you care about diversity, they don't care about diversity, honestly, I would just leave, right? There's plenty of jobs in the Valley, there's plenty of companies, there's plenty of people vying to get you. Why would you even bother trying to push that boulder uphill? But if you want to, more power to you, do it, try. And the way you would try is have the conversations up and down the food chain, both at the executive level, at the people ops team, at the individual level. Try to affect change yourself. Try to affect change by virtue of some of the fun event stuff that I mentioned, by formulating an ERG or what have you. Each one of us have to try, but at the end of it, you can make a much greater impact in an organization that's supportive of your values. If you're in the organization that's supportive of your values, and the conversation is really about, oh, I need this engineer yesterday, I don't have time to source and wait for a diverse candidate, that's totally different. That's a totally different conversation. The conversation there should be that loop that I showed you. Start with retention, not with sourcing. Make sure that you have the right structure in place to keep these candidates, and then come all the way back to sourcing. And then when you come back to role definition and sourcing, know that this is not the recruiting team's problem. This is your problem as a hiring manager as well. So for me and my engineering managers, their OKRs are fill my open roles. They're not the OKRs of the recruiter. They are shared, but you as a hiring manager are equally responsible for filling your roles, and if you're passionate about diversity, then you do that. The third thing, it's really, if you haven't thought through the entire loop, if you haven't thought through, even from a sourcing standpoint, how you're going to go about finding diverse candidates, or what some of these organizations are where you should be doing your outreach, you can't hold the business hostage. It would be hard for me to say, go to a recruiter and say, oh, I want 5 women in the organization, 5 out of my 10 recs should be women, but we haven't really nailed how we're going to retain and source these candidates. So start with retention, work your way to sourcing, but even when you get to sourcing, experiment. Just like when you code something and you ship something, you do an A/B test. Do A/B testing. Figure out which channels work for you from a sourcing standpoint, and then double down and set yourself achievable goals. The method to this madness is to make sure that you're setting achievable goals, which are setting you up for success. If you don't set achievable goals, you will just ruin the messaging all the way.
And with that, I want to thank our speaker, Nidhi, for a great discussion.
Thanks,
a round of applause for Nidhi, everybody. Thank you.
Of course.